My mother pretended to have terminal cancer for 3 years, and I found out in the worst possible way. When she fainted at my engagement party claiming to have only 6 months to live, my godfather doctor exposed her in front of 200 guests. My mother collapsed dramatically on the gleaming floor of the country club ballroom during the exact moment Ricardo was raising his Perrier. Jouet champagne flute for our engagement toast, her white lace-gloved hands clutching her chest with theatrical force, as she screamed in a shrill voice that she had only 6 months of life remaining, causing 200 meticulously selected guests from the city's social elite to instantly freeze with baccarat crystal glasses suspended in mid-air in frozen poses of interrupted toast and expressions of absolute horror etched on their made-up and clean, shaven faces reflecting the golden light of Venetian crystal chandeliers, while she convulsively sobbed on the polished Carrara marble floor that mirrored her distorted image as in a surrealist Salvador Dali nightmare, where time had stopped at the exact moment of calculated emotional destruction. The sharp and piercing sound of French crystal shattering against the floor, when several society ladies dropped their glasses in absolute shock, reverberated through the ballroom, decorated with monumental arrangements of white avalanche roses imported from Ecuador, Phalaenopsis orchids suspended in aerial installations, and golden LED lights strategically positioned to create an ethereal atmosphere, creating an infernal cacophony of broken glass mixed with collective gasps from Pearl, necklaced ladies, desperate murmurs from gentlemen in Armani tuxedos, and the muffled sound of Louboutin heels running in various directions across the marble, transforming my meticulously planned engagement celebration into a macabre spectacle of Shakespearean family tragedy, where the stage was the city's most exclusive ballroom and the audience was composed of the cream of local society. Helena, my 62-year-old mother who until that fateful moment had maintained an absolutely impeccable appearance with her navy blue Valentino haute couture dress that had cost the equivalent of 3 months of my salary, diamond earrings that belonged to my grandmother, 3-strand Mikimoto pearl necklace perfectly aligned on her still firm neckline thanks to Pilates exercises and weekly aesthetic treatments, hair perfectly styled in an elaborate French bun that had taken 3 hours at the most expensive salon in the city that morning, now lay on the cold floor like a leading actress in a Shakespearean drama playing Lady Macbeth at the height of her madness, with tears dramatically running down her face made up with MAC Studio Fix foundation. Waterproof Chanel eyeliner smearing in gothic black trails down her cheeks flushed with Dior blush, while repeating between perfectly timed theatrical sobs that her terminal cancer had progressed inexorably beyond any possibility of modern or experimental medical treatment, that the best oncologists in the country had declared her case lost, that the metastases had spread like poisonous tentacles throughout all her vital organs, leaving her with mere months of agony before the inevitable end that awaited her like a death sentence already signed by cruel fate. Ricardo, my 40-year-old fiancé who had just delivered the most moving and eloquent speech about our future together. Words he had rehearsed for weeks that spoke of eternal love, unwavering companionship, and shared dreams of a life filled with adventure and complicity, immediately dropped the wireless Sennheiser microphone which produced a sharp feedback as it fell onto the mahogany podium, and ran in my direction with his Italian leather Oxford shoes urgently echoing against the marble. But I remained completely frozen like a pillar of salt in the exact geometric center of the hall, wearing my gold pure silk dress with Swarovski crystal embroidery that had been specially designed by a renowned stylist for this unique occasion, my feet in Jimmy Choo stiletto heels firmly planted on the floor as if they had grown roots, observing with a nauseating mixture of disbelief, repressed anger, and deep emotional exhaustion as my mother performed that melodramatic scene that I had witnessed in different variations, like musical themes with distinct arrangements but the same bass melody. During the last 3 endless years since she had first announced her terminal cancer diagnosis with surgical timing, of exactly 1 week after I had casually mentioned during a Sunday lunch that I was seriously dating Ricardo and considering a future together. The absolutely perfect and mathematically precise synchronization between my increasingly desperate attempts to build an independent and autonomous love life and my mother's conveniently timed health crises had become such a predictably consistent pattern that I could practically time with Swiss watchmaker precision when she would have her next sudden and dramatic deterioration, based exclusively on the important milestones and significant moments of my relationship with Ricardo. Our first official meeting with his family at an elegant French restaurant had resulted in an emergency hospitalization for severe cardiac complications that kept me at the hospital for 72 consecutive hours, Our first romantic trip together to Campos do Jordão mysteriously coincided with an urgent, unspecified surgery that required my constant presence during the 2-week recovery. Our first dating anniversary was marked by an acute respiratory crisis that happened exactly when we were leaving for dinner. And now our long-awaited and carefully planned engagement had provoked the public and dramatic announcement of imminent death in 6 months, a significant escalation in the intensity of the manipulations that suggested growing desperation on her part. For 3 interminable years that felt like decades of refined psychological torture, my life had been completely and absolutely dominated by Helena's supposed terminal cancer that mysteriously and conveniently worsened dramatically whenever I tried to take significant steps, however small, toward emotional independence, professional achievement, or personal happiness, but improved miraculously and inexplicably when I canceled important plans, ended promising relationships, refused professional opportunities, or dedicated 100% of my attention, energy, and emotional resources exclusively to her, as if her health were directly proportional to my personal sacrifice and inversely proportional to my individual happiness. The initial devastating diagnosis had arrived on a seemingly ordinary and unpretentious Thursday afternoon in March, when the sky was absurdly blue and the IP trees were blooming profusely throughout the city. When I had just returned from an absolutely wonderful and transformative lunch with Ricardo at a cozy Italian bistro, where we had discussed with youthful enthusiasm the real and tangible possibility of a future together, including marriage, children, and growing old side by side, I arrived home practically floating with happiness, with my heart racing with possibilities and my face flushed with budding love, only to find Helena strategically seated in the moss-green velvet armchair in the living room, positioned to be the first thing I would see upon entering, with a carefully rehearsed, somber, and apocalyptic expression. Holding medical papers she claimed were definitive and indisputable results of complex tests, confirming advanced stage 4 cancer, with widespread and aggressive metastases that would require immediate aggressive chemotherapy treatment, experimental radiotherapy, multiple high-risk surgeries, and most importantly, my constant, dedicated, and exclusive presence by her side during every second of the approaching battle. From that fateful moment that divided my life into before and after like a cruel demarcation line, my previously balanced and promising existence transformed into a devastating and unpredictable emotional roller coaster, where every attempt, however timid, to live my own life, pursue my own dreams, or cultivate my own happiness was immediately and surgically sabotaged by a conveniently timed medical crisis that forced me to choose between being a devoted and loving daughter who sacrificed everything for her dying mother, or being judged by everyone as a selfish, cold, and unnatural woman who abandoned her own agonizing mother for frivolous and superficial personal pleasures. Helena had refined and perfected her psychological manipulation into a macabre and sophisticated art, always choosing with military precision the absolutely crucial and irreplaceable moments to have serious and potentially fatal complications. The night before my interview for an important promotion that represented years of hard work and dedication, she had a severe respiratory crisis that kept me in the hospital emergency room all night without sleeping a second, arriving at the interview exhausted and unfocused. The long weekend that Ricardo had meticulously planned to officially ask me to be his girlfriend at a romantic inn in Petropolis coincided with an adverse and potentially fatal reaction to chemotherapy that required intensive care and constant vigilance. And each commemorative date, each significant social event, each moment of potential joy was inevitably and predictably ruined by some dramatic medical emergency that could only be adequately resolved with my immediate presence, total attention, and exclusive dedication. The most deeply disturbing and psychologically devastating aspect of that entire Kafkaesque situation was the meticulous and calculated way Helena had transformed her supposed terminal illness into a sophisticated psychological weapon of emotional mass destruction that she wielded with the surgical precision of a neurosurgeon whenever she felt, even minimally, that she was losing absolute control over my life, my decisions, and my future. She had memorized with academic perfection detailed symptoms of different types of cancer that she recited with dramatic conviction worthy of an actor's studio actress to perplexed doctors, concerned nurses, and anyone who showed the slightest interest or concern, creating a narrative so elaborately consistent, detailed, and medically plausible that even experienced healthcare professionals with decades of practice seemed genuinely convinced of the extreme gravity and terminal nature of her condition. Her vivid, visceral, and disturbingly specific descriptions of excruciating pains that pierced through her like flaming spears debilitating nausea that left her prostrate for hours, extreme fatigue that made even the simplest tasks impossible, were presented with such theatrical mastery, with perfectly calculated dramatic pauses, sighs of contained suffering, and tears that emerged at the exact moment for maximum emotional impact, that I frequently questioned myself with shattering guilt if perhaps she really was sick. If the cancer was real, and I was being a monstrously insensitive, cynical, and cruel daughter for doubting the genuine suffering of my own mother. During these 3 years of refined and systematic psychological torture disguised as a family medical crisis, I had sacrificed absolutely all significant aspects of my personal, professional, and social life on the bloody altar of Helena's illness. Like an ancient priestess offering endless oblations to an insatiable and cruel goddess, I refused with a broken heart a golden transfer to the company's international branch in London that represented the pinnacle of my career because Helena claimed through dramatic tears that she wouldn't survive a single day without my daily physical and emotional support. I transformed my previously cozy and personal apartment into a sterile and depressing extension of a hospital environment, with rented medical equipment that she insisted were absolutely essential for her minimal comfort, an adjustable hospital bed, an oxygen concentrator that was never used, an arsenal of medications organized in labeled plastic boxes, turning my personal refuge into a permanent memorial to illness. And mainly, in a more painful and devastating way, I had almost lost Ricardo multiple times when I had to cancel important meetings at the last minute, abandon trips planned months in advance, and miss crucial moments of our relationship because Helena had some mysterious medical emergency that only my specific presence could solve. As if I were some kind of medicinal talisman, whose mere proximity had healing properties. The guilt that she skillfully and methodically cultivated in me was like an invisible but unbreakable chain of forged iron that bound me to a miserable existence of absolute emotional servitude, where any attempt, even the most timid and hesitant, to prioritize my own happiness, well, being or future, was immediately and violently punished with devastating accusations of filial abandonment, criminal neglect, and inhumane cruelty that no truly loving daughter would be capable of demonstrating. The words she used were chosen with surgical precision to cause maximum emotional damage. A daughter who truly loved her dying mother would never choose a romantic dinner over the last precious moments together. When I die soon, you will bitterly regret every second you wasted away from me. What kind of person abandons their own mother with terminal cancer for superficial fun? Each phrase a direct stab to the center of my already tortured conscience. Now, observing with painful crystal clarity Helena performing on the gleaming floor of the party hall, surrounded by concerned and well-intentioned guests, who had no idea they were witnessing yet another meticulously calculated and rehearsed performance, instead of a genuine and urgent medical emergency, I felt a nauseating and overwhelming mixture of long-suppressed volcanic anger, deep exhaustion that penetrated to my bones, and mainly a sudden and revealing clarity, like lightning illuminating the darkness about the destructive and toxic pattern that I had passively allowed to dominate and destroy my life for too long, like poisonous ivy that slowly strangles the host tree until it sucks all its vitality. Marcia, my older sister who had driven 8 hours from São Paulo especially for the engagement party, leaving her children with her mother-in-law and reorganizing her entire professional schedule to be present at this important moment, gracefully knelt beside Helena on the marble floor, her coral silk dress spreading like a pool of color around her, trying to gently console our mother with whispered words and soft touches, but her brown eyes met mine across the chaotic space of the hall, with an unmistakable expression of tired understanding and silent complicity. She too had been a repeated victim of maternal manipulations elaborated over decades, although to a lesser degree and intensity, because she had established firm geographical and emotional boundaries that partially protected her from Helena's toxic and destructive reach. "Someone call an ambulance immediately. We need urgent medical help," shouted Fernando, my usually calm and controlled brother-in-law, with an authoritative voice that cut through the growing chaos as he desperately tried to organize the chaotic situation that had settled in the hall, with people running in random directions like ants, whose anthill was disturbed, some frantically searching for medical help on their phones, others simply fleeing embarrassed from the explosive family drama that had transformed an elegant and sophisticated celebration into a humiliating public spectacle of extreme family dysfunction. But I remained absolutely still, like a marble statue in the center of all that deafening commotion, my feet seeming to have created deep roots in the polished floor. watching with dry eyes and neutral expression as Helena dramatically escalated her most ambitious and daring performance to date. She had exponentially increased the intensity of her manipulations, moving from vague illnesses and intermittent symptoms that allowed some ambiguity to a public and unequivocal announcement of imminent death in 6 months. Calculated with mathematical precision to cause maximum emotional impact, social embarrassment, and mainly to ensure with absolute certainty that my engagement would be forever and indelibly stained by the dark shadow of her supposed medical tragedy. Ricardo held my right hand with reassuring but not suffocating strength, intertwining our fingers in a silent demonstration of support and union. His deep, dark eyes conveying a complex mixture of genuine concern for the unfolding chaos, contained frustration with yet another conveniently timed crisis, and a silent question about how to proceed in this impossible situation. He had personally witnessed numerous similar crises during our 3 years of relationship, from strategic fainting at important dinners to mysterious hospitalizations that coincided with our attempts at intimacy, and had developed a healthy and justified skepticism about the veracity of Helena's medical emergencies, but still maintained the basic respect and social composure necessary to not openly confront a woman who publicly claimed to be dying of terminal cancer. "Laura, my love, your mother clearly needs urgent medical attention. We should accompany her to the hospital immediately," he whispered in my left ear with his deep and melodious voice, his warm breath against my skin causing involuntary shivers. But his careful intonation carried an implicit and urgent question about whether this was definitely another of the elaborate manipulations we had exhaustively discussed so many times in private late-night conversations where I expressed with tears of frustration my growing and disturbing doubts about the authenticity of Helena's illness. It was precisely at this moment of absolute and surreal chaos, with the sound of overlapping voices creating an incomprehensible cacophony, that I first noticed Dr. Paulo, my beloved godfather and nationally respected physician, who had been an inseparable college colleague of my deceased father and maintained a close friendship with our family for decades. Observing the entire dramatic scene from his privileged observation point near the main entrance, with a peculiar and revealing facial expression that combined immediate recognition of what was happening, deep understanding of the implications, and something that strangely resembled resolute determination of someone who had made an important decision. He had characteristically arrived late to the engagement due to a complex emergency heart surgery at Central Hospital, where he worked as the renowned head of the oncology department for more than 15 years, still wearing an Oxford gray suit obviously hastily put on over the green hospital clothes that were still partially visible at the collar. His graying hair slightly disheveled, suggesting he had run straight from the operating room, and now walked decidedly through the agitated crowd toward Helena with a professional and focused expression that dramatically contrasted with the widespread and uncontrolled panic around him, like a surgeon entering a chaotic operating room. When he finally knelt with the practiced grace of decades of medicine beside my mother and began examining her with the impeccable clinical precision of someone with 3 decades of medical experience in critical life or death situations, I noticed an almost imperceptible moment, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, where his penetrating blue eyes narrowed with what appeared to be genuine surprise, followed immediately by sudden and complete understanding, as if pieces of a complex puzzle had suddenly fit perfectly in his mind. His experienced hands checked Helena's pulse at the neck with 2 fingers, observed the coloration of her nails and lips, gently lifted her eyelids to examine the pupils with a small medical flashlight he always carried, and performed a series of quick but thorough checks that revealed decades of experience in emergency diagnostics. "Helena, it's me, Paulo. I need you to listen to me very carefully now," he said with a firm yet gentle voice that carried unquestionable medical authority. The kind of voice that experienced doctors develop for situations where they need to take complete control while keeping patients calm, as he continued methodically checking her vital signs with practiced and efficient movements that demonstrated countless years of experience in real emergency situations. "Your vital signs are completely stable within normal parameters. Your coloration is excellent, indicating good oxygenation. Your pupils react normally to light, and there is absolutely no immediate clinical indication of any acute medical crisis of any nature. You are clearly having an anxiety or panic attack, not an oncological or cardiac emergency." His precise medical words cut through the ambient chaos like a sharp scalpel blade, creating a sudden, dense and tense silence in the hall, where 200 people collectively held their breath in unison, waiting with nervous anticipation for Helena's response to that authoritative medical assessment that completely and publicly contradicted her dramatic performance. Helena opened her brown eyes with suspicious speed for someone supposedly on the verge of death, an expression of offended indignation and outrage forming on her face as she visibly prepared to vehemently protest Dr. Paulo's diagnosis, her mouth already opening to release what would certainly be a torrent of denials and accusations. But he skillfully interrupted her with a series of direct and incisive questions that made my heart race with nervous anticipation and cautious hope. Helena, I need crucial medical information immediately. Who exactly is your responsible oncologist? In which specific hospital are you receiving treatment? What chemotherapy protocol are you following? I need to contact your medical team immediately to understand your history and treatment protocol to be able to help you adequately. The direct simplicity and inescapable factual nature of his questions created a moment of palpable tension where the air seemed to have solidified. Helena visibly hesitated like an actress who had forgotten her lines, her eyes frantically scanning the crowd of expectant faces like a cornered animal looking for an escape route from the verbal trap that Dr. Paulo had skillfully and methodically constructed around her. Dr. Mendez, from Central Hospital. He is traveling to an international medical congress in Miami. Helena responded with a suddenly weak, hesitant, and stuttering voice, a dramatic and revealing change from the intense and convincing emotional performance of minutes before. As if someone had suddenly turned off a switch. Dr. Paulo frowned with genuine professional confusion, slowly shaking his head from side to side as he processed the clearly false information, his eyes narrowing with growing understanding. Helena, that is absolutely impossible. There is no Dr. Mendez in oncology at Central Hospital. There never has been. I have personally been the head of that department for 15 consecutive years and intimately know each oncologist not only from the hospital, but from the entire city and metropolitan region. We participate in weekly meetings, monthly conferences, and maintain constant communication about complex cases, he declared with a professional certainty and authority that left absolutely no space for doubts, ambiguities, or alternative interpretations. The silence that followed was deafening in its density, a vacuum of sound where even breaths seemed to have been indefinitely suspended, while everyone in the hall processed with increasing shock the absolutely devastating implications of that public and incontestable revelation. Helena tried to stand up abruptly with suspicious energy for someone in terminal condition, claiming in a high-pitched voice that she urgently needed fresh air, her suddenly agile movements completely contradicting the extreme fragility she had demonstrated moments before. But Dr. Paulo gently but absolutely firmly kept her seated with a firm hand on her shoulder, his medical touch allowing no resistance, while he continued with an even more serious and grave voice. Helena, as your friend of decades and as a physician, I need to be completely and brutally honest with you and especially with Laura. As the head of oncology at the only specialized cancer treatment center within 300 kilometers, I would have absolute and detailed knowledge of any terminal cancer patient receiving treatment in our region. It's standard protocol. You have never been my patient. Never been a patient of any of my colleagues. There are no medical records of yours in any hospital in this city, and I can categorically state that you are not and have never been in oncological treatment. I felt my legs violently trembling as if the floor had suddenly become liquid beneath my feet. The revelation I had suspected in the dark depths of my subconscious, but never had the emotional courage to confirm or confront being exposed publicly in such a definitive, irrefutable, and devastating way that left no space for denial or rationalization. Ricardo held me firmly with both arms, anticipating with his characteristic sensitivity that I might literally collapse under the crushing emotional weight of confirmation that my mother had deliberately and cruelly lied about having terminal cancer for 3 whole years, systematically destroying every aspect of my personal, professional, and emotional life with a completely and absolutely fabricated illness. The shocked murmurs of the guests created a growing buzz of incredulous voices, like a swarm of agitated bees, but I could only focus with hypnotic clarity on Helena's face, which had instantly lost all color, transforming into a pale, waxy mask of absolute panic as her elaborate 3-year medical fantasy publicly crumbled like a house of cards in a windstorm. This is complete nonsense. Slander. I have all the tests, all the medical reports, all the documentation. Helena protested with growing and palpable desperation, her voice rising several octaves as she desperately tried to save her collapsing narrative. but her voice had completely lost the dramatic conviction and emotional power that characterized her usual performances, now sounding shrill and desperate. Dr. Paolo maintained his impeccable professional composure, his face a mask of medical calm, but his blue eyes showed a complex mixture of compassion for the suffering he was causing, unwavering determination to expose the truth, and a deep sadness for what he was being forced to do. Helena, falsifying medical documents is a federal crime punishable by imprisonment, besides being a particularly cruel form of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. If you really have these documents as you claim, I strongly suggest you present them immediately to the competent authorities for verification. But I can guarantee with absolute certainty that any competent medical professional will immediately identify them as crude forgeries. Real medical exams have specific protocols, watermarks, verification codes that are impossible to replicate. Marcia, who had remained kneeling beside Helena throughout the devastating confrontation, slowly rose with measured movements, her face a mask of painful understanding mixed with contained volcanic anger that she was clearly struggling to control. Her hands visibly trembled as she smoothed her wrinkled coral dress, and when she spoke, her voice carried decades of repressed frustration. "Mother, how could you do something so monstrous? How were you capable of this? Laura sacrificed 3 entire years of her life caring for you with absolute devotion, canceled unrepeatable professional opportunities that will never return, almost lost the man she deeply loves, destroyed her physical and mental health. All, absolutely all, based on a monstrous and unforgivable lie," she asked with a voice trembling with barely contained emotion, each word coming out with difficulty as if she were spitting out shards of glass, expressing aloud what I still couldn't articulate through the paralyzing emotional shock that consumed me. Fernando protectively embraced Marcia, his normally jovial face now somber with understanding of the magnitude of betrayal, while she began to cry convulsively, not tears of sadness for Helena's supposed illness, but tears of pure anger and frustration at the cruel and calculated manipulation she had witnessed, and of which she had been partially complicit through silence. Helena frantically looked around the hall like a cornered animal, her brown eyes widened with growing panic, realizing with devastating clarity that she had completely and irrevocably lost control of the situation, that her performance had been exposed as fraud before our entire family, friends, and influential social circle, who would spread the story throughout the city. In one last desperate and pathetic act of manipulation, she began to dramatically hyperventilate with quick, shallow breaths, pressing both hands against her chest as if having an actual heart attack, her eyes rolling theatrically. But Dr. Paolo remained completely unperturbed and professional, observing her with the dispassionate clinical gaze of someone who had seen countless amateur attempts at medical simulation during his long career. "Helena, please stop this ridiculous performance immediately. Your breathing is theatrically accelerated, but your pulse remains stable at 72 beats per minute. Your pupils show no signs of real cardiovascular distress. Your facial color indicates perfectly normal circulation, and your movements are too coordinated for someone in cardiac crisis. You're only exponentially worsening the already catastrophic situation with more cheap theater." It was precisely at this moment of maximum tension that Teresa, Helena's younger sister, who had remained silently observing like a sentinel from the back of the hall, partially hidden behind a monumental arrangement of tropical flowers, walked slowly but deliberately toward us, her heels echoing ominously in the tense silence, with an expression of tired resignation and evident guilt that suggested prior and prolonged knowledge about my mother's manipulations. Her emerald green dress rippled with each step as she navigated through the paralyzed crowd that opened like the Red Sea for her passage. "Paolo is absolutely right, Helena. Enough elaborate lies, enough cruel manipulations, enough systematically destroying your own daughter's life with your sick and pathological fantasies of absolute control," she said with unwavering firmness, her voice carrying the weight of long, kept secrets, deliberately positioning herself at my side as a clear and public demonstration of support and alliance. "I warned you repeatedly for 3 years that this would end in catastrophe, that Laura would inevitably discover the truth, that your lies would be exposed. But you were so obsessed and blind in maintaining totalitarian control over her that you completely ignored all warnings, advice, and pleas to stop before it was too late. The revelation that Teresa knew about Helena's medical farce all this time added another devastating layer of betrayal to the already emotionally catastrophic situation. Not only had my mother deliberately lied about having terminal cancer, but other family members had complete knowledge of the monstrous lie, and had consciously chosen to remain in complicit silence while I sacrificed precious and irretrievable years of my life, devotedly caring for a perfectly healthy woman who pretended to be dying. The sense of betrayal multiplied exponentially, engulfing me like a giant wave. You knew? All this hellish time you knew she was blatantly lying and didn't tell me? Let me suffer, sacrifice myself, destroy myself for a lie you knew about? I asked Teresa with a voice choked by a toxic mixture of disbelief, deep hurt, and growing anger, each word coming out with difficulty through my emotion, tightened throat. Teresa lowered her honey eyes with palpable shame, her shoulders falling in defeat before responding in a small voice. Laura, my dear niece, I tried to subtly warn you several times. Repeatedly suggested you get a second medical opinion, publicly questioned the lack of visible symptoms compatible with advanced cancer, strategically positioned medical articles about Munchausen syndrome. But Helena threatened me with emotional violence, said that if I told the truth, she would reveal to the whole family about... She abruptly stopped mid-sentence, her face blushing deeply, clearly reluctant to reveal the secret that Helena had used as blackmail against her. It doesn't matter now what she had against me. What's important and urgent is that the truth has finally been publicly revealed, and you can finally free yourself from this suffocating emotional prison that she methodically created around you. Dr. Paulo, maintaining his unwavering medical and moral authority over the chaotic situation, addressed me directly with the comforting paternal kindness that I vividly remembered from my childhood, when he carried me on his shoulders and called me little princess. Laura, my dear and beloved goddaughter, as a doctor with 30 years of experience and as someone who watched you grow up since you were a baby, who held you in his arms on the day you were born, I need to tell you with all seriousness that you have been the victim of severe and prolonged psychological abuse. What your mother did, deliberately pretending to have a terminal illness to control every aspect of your life, is a serious and criminal form of manipulation that causes deep and lasting psychological damage, comparable to the trauma of psychological torture. You have absolutely no fault for believing her. Children naturally trust their parents unconditionally. It's a biological instinct. And Helena exploited this sacred trust in an absolutely unforgivable and monstrous way. His authoritative and compassionate medical words violently broke the last emotional barrier that I had desperately kept raised to protect myself from the emotional tsunami, and tears began to flow freely in uncontrollable torrents as 3 years of accumulated tension, paralyzing fear, crushing guilt, and completely unnecessary sacrifice overflowed in convulsive sobs that shook my entire body like emotional earthquakes. Ricardo held me firmly against his chest, completely enveloping me in his strong arms, whispering words of comfort and unconditional love, while I finally allowed myself to feel the devastating extent of the volcanic anger and oceanic hurt that I had repressed during hellish years of dedicated and loving care for a woman who had transformed the sacred concept of maternal love into a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Helena, realizing with crystal clarity that she had completely and irreversibly lost any vestige of credibility, control, or power over the situation that she had orchestrated with such manipulative mastery for 3 consecutive years, tried one last desperate emotional play that represented the supreme pinnacle of her refined psychological manipulation ability. Genuine tears began to stream down her face as she instantly transformed from cruel perpetrator to helpless victim, her voice acquiring a broken and vulnerable tone that I hadn't heard since my father's death 15 years ago. Laura, my beloved daughter, you need to understand that I did all this exclusively out of desperate love, out of paralyzing fear of losing you forever as I lost your father. When you naturally began to move away from me, building your independent life with Ricardo, developing your brilliant career, creating your own social circle, I panicked, absolutely thinking that I would be completely alone and abandoned in old age, that you would forget me like an inconvenient relic of the past, that I would die alone and helpless in some nursing home, with no one to hold my hand in the final moments. She sobbed with what seemed to be genuine emotion for the first time in years, but her words, instead of provoking compassion or understanding, only exponentially intensified my anger because they revealed with disturbing clarity that she had consciously chosen to destroy my life out of pure selfishness, instead of accepting the natural and healthy process of an adult daughter establishing independence. Love? Love? I finally exploded with a voice I didn't recognize as my own. 3 years of suppressed volcanic anger gushing like incandescent lava from a volcano that had remained dormantly threatening for too long, causing several guests to take involuntary steps backward as if my words were physically dangerous. You call it love to make me believe for 1,095 consecutive days that you were agonizingly dying of cancer? You call it love to make me live every second of these 3 hellish years with the constant and paralyzing terror that each hug could be the last, each conversation could be the final one, each moment together was counted in a macabre hourglass? You have the monstrous audacity to call it love, to make me repeatedly choose between my own life and happiness, or being eternally judged as the unnatural daughter who abandoned her dying mother. My voice progressively rose until it became a primitive scream of pain and fury that echoed through the hall like the cry of a mortally wounded animal. The guests began to withdraw discreetly in small whispering groups, clearly uncomfortable with the extreme and visceral level of family drama being publicly exposed, some murmuring polite excuses about urgent commitments, others simply escaping silently through the nearest exit like refugees fleeing from an emotional war zone, leaving only the closest family and a few brave, intimate friends who remained out of genuine concern or morbid curiosity about how that modern Greek tragedy would unfold. The previously vibrant and festive hall with its luxurious decorations and golden lighting now looked like a devastated, emotional battlefield, with broken glasses scattered like shards of destroyed hopes, knocked over floral arrangements like shattered dreams, and the untouched 5-tier engagement cake at the center like a melancholic monument to a celebration that had transformed into a funeral for family relationships. Helena tried to stand up again with abrupt and uncoordinated movements, her previously impeccable Valentino dress now wrinkled and stained with smudged mascara, transforming her appearance from elegant socialite into something grotesquely pathetic, like a broken and abandoned porcelain doll. You understand absolutely nothing. I was protecting Laura from making the biggest mistake of her life. Ricardo is not the right man for her. Any truly loving mother would realize this instantly. He will eventually abandon her like all men do. Will trade her for someone younger when she ages, will destroy her heart into 1,000 pieces. I was just trying to save her from this terrible fate, keep her safely by my side where she naturally belongs. She screamed with growing desperation, revealing even deeper and more disturbing layers of her controlling pathology. Each word confirming that her manipulation wasn't just about fear of abandonment, but about unhealthy possession and categorical refusal to accept my autonomy as an adult woman. Ricardo, who had remained silently supporting me throughout the devastating confrontation, finally lost his characteristic patience and zen composure, his normally soft and melodic voice becoming hard as tempered steel. Mrs. Helena, with all the respect I can still gather after 3 years watching you systematically destroy the woman I love with your cruel and calculated manipulations, you have absolutely no moral, ethical, or legal right to determine with whom Laura should or should not share her life. For 3 endless years, I watched helplessly as you transformed her into a pale and exhausted shadow of the vibrant and full of life woman I met, always respecting family boundaries and naively believing that your illness was real. But now that the truth has been exposed in all its ugliness, I solemnly promise that I will do absolutely everything in my power to protect Laura from your toxic clutches, including restrictive legal measures if necessary. Marcia, partially recovering from the initial shock, approached me with careful steps, as if I were an injured animal that might run away at any moment, her brown eyes overflowing with tears of guilt and regret. Laura, my dear sister, forgive me for all the moments when I suspected something was deeply wrong, but chose cowardly silence instead of investigating more deeply. All those times I casually commented that Mom seemed strangely well for someone in chemotherapy, that her hair remained inexplicably perfect, that she never showed real side effects. I should have insisted, should have demanded to see tests, should have protected you from this psychological torture instead of taking comfortable refuge in the geographical distance of São Paulo. I was an unforgivable coward who prioritized superficial family peace over your genuine well-being. It's not your fault, Marcia, I replied with a voice hoarse from so much crying, feeling a deep exhaustion that penetrated every cell of my body as if I had aged decades in minutes. Helena is a master manipulator who spent her entire life perfecting her techniques of emotional control. Since our childhood, she always used strategic illnesses, conveniently timed crises, and dramatically orchestrated emergencies to keep everyone under her absolute control. Remember when you were accepted into that university in Portugal, and she suddenly developed a mysterious heart condition that required your constant presence? or when our father started questioning her excessive spending, and she had those debilitating migraines that made him feel guilty for stressing her. The pattern was always there. Hidden beneath layers of family denial and normalization of abusive behavior, we just unconsciously chose not to see because confronting the truth would be admitting that our mother is fundamentally incapable of healthy, non-toxic love. Fernando, who had observed mostly in analytical silence, finally expressed what many were thinking but no one had verbalized. With all due respect to the complexity of family relationships and blood ties, Helena clearly needs urgent professional psychiatric intervention. This level of pathological manipulation, the extreme elaboration of the lie maintained for 3 years, the complete absence of genuine remorse even after public exposure. These are classic symptoms of severe narcissistic personality disorder, possibly combined with antisocial features. She represents a real and present psychological danger to anyone in her emotional orbit, especially Laura, who is her primary target of obsessive control. Helena turned violently toward Fernando with eyes blazing with wounded narcissistic fury. "How dare you, you insignificant person? You're not even truly family, just an outsider who infiltrated through marriage. You have absolutely no right to comment on intimate matters between mother and daughter. You've all turned against me in a cruel conspiracy, a coordinated ambush to publicly humiliate me at what should have been a family celebration. Paulo was obviously bought by Ricardo to lie about my medical records. Teresa has always been jealous of my special relationship with Laura, and Marcia is just taking the opportunity to get revenge for old childhood rivalries." She poured out increasingly disconnected paranoid accusations, her mind clearly struggling to construct an alternative narrative where she remained the wronged victim, rather than the exposed perpetrator. Paulo grabbed his phone and started typing quickly while speaking with unwavering professional authority. "I'm contacting Dr. Marina Cavalcanti, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in severe personality disorders at the Central Psychiatric Hospital. Helena needs immediate psychiatric evaluation, not just for Laura's well-being, but for her own mental safety." This level of dissociation from reality, the inability to recognize the severity of her actions, the absence of genuine remorse, these are red flags that cannot be ignored. As a doctor, I have an ethical and legal obligation to report cases of severe psychological abuse, especially when there is evidence that the behavior will continue and possibly escalate without professional intervention. "You cannot commit me! I'm not crazy! I'm just a mother who loves her daughter too much!" Helena screamed with increasing hysteria, her previous composure completely evaporated, replaced by primitive panic of a cornered animal. "Laura, my daughter, my baby, you won't let them do this to me, will you? After everything we've been through together, all the precious moments we've shared, you can't just discard me like inconvenient trash. Remember when you were 5 and had severe pneumonia? I stayed by your side in the hospital for 2 weeks without leaving for a second. Remember when you cried for 3 days when your first boyfriend broke up with you? I comforted you, dried your tears, promised everything would be all right. Where is your filial gratitude? Where is your love for the one who gave you life?" Her desperate attempts at emotional manipulation, using genuine memories of moments where she had demonstrated real maternal care, only intensified my pain, because they tragically highlighted the contrast between the mother she could have been, capable of genuine love and care, and the manipulative monster she chose to become, weaponizing even the sacred moments of authentic maternal connection as tools of control. Yes, mother, you cared for me as a child because that's what mothers do. It's the minimum moral and legal obligation of anyone who chooses to bring a life into the world. But that doesn't give you carte blanche to destroy my adult life with monstrous lies. Healthy maternal love celebrates children's independence. It doesn't systematically sabotage it. True love liberates, it doesn't imprison. What you call love is a sick possession, obsessive control, emotional vampirism that sucks all my vital energy, leaving only an empty shell. I responded with an emotional clarity that surprised me, as if the exposed truth had suddenly crystallized years of confusion and internal conflict into clear understanding. Teresa, visibly gathering courage for an important revelation, took a deep breath before adding another devastating bomb. "Since we're finally exposing all the buried truths of this toxic family, I need to confess something crucial, Laura. This isn't the first time Helena has faked a serious illness for control. When you were children and your father began considering divorce due to her increasingly erratic and controlling behavior, Helena suddenly developed a rare neurological condition that miraculously disappeared as soon as he gave up on separation and agreed to couple therapy that she subsequently sabotaged. I have documents. Letters from your father to my husband describing the despair of living with someone who used illness as a weapon, but he stayed to protect you and Marcia. He died believing he had failed as a husband for not being able to heal Helena with enough love, when in fact he was another victim of her pathological manipulations. The revelation that my father had also been a victim of the same pattern of psychological abuse was like a punch to the stomach that momentarily left me breathless, forcing me to reassess all the memories of my childhood through a new and disturbing lens. Fragmented memories suddenly made terrible sense. My father always looking exhausted and defeated. The whispered discussions late at night that I didn't understand. His premature death from a heart attack at 52 that doctors attributed to severe chronic stress. Helena transforming into a suffering widow who used grief as a new manipulation tool for years, demanding total dedication from her daughters to compensate for the devastating loss that she herself had orchestrated through decades of psychological torture. My God, Marcia whispered with growing horror as the pieces of the family puzzle fit together. Dad didn't just die of natural causes. He was literally driven to death by the stress of living with her. And we always blamed his work, the professional pressure, when the real killer was sleeping beside him every night, slowly destroying him with fabricated crises and constant manipulations. How many lives have you destroyed, Mother? How many people have you emotionally vampirized until nothing remained but empty shells? Dad, Laura, and how many other victims we don't even know about? Helena began to have what seemed to be a genuine psychotic breakdown, alternating between hysterical laughter and convulsive sobs, her words becoming increasingly incoherent and disconnected. You don't understand anything. I am the victim here. I've always been the victim. Nobody ever truly loved me. Everyone always wanted to abandon me. My mother left me with my grandmother when I was 3. My first husband ran away when he found out I was pregnant. All the men I loved betrayed me. I was just protecting myself, ensuring that at least my daughters would never abandon me. Is it a crime to want to be loved? Is it a crime to be afraid of dying alone? You are all cruel monsters who are destroying a sick woman. Dr. Paulo, having completed his arrangements by phone, announced with professional calm, the psychiatric ambulance will arrive in 15 minutes. Dr. Marina has agreed to evaluate Helena immediately given the gravity of the situation. This is not a punitive involuntary commitment, but a genuine attempt to get professional help for someone clearly in severe mental crisis. Helena needs intensive psychiatric treatment, not just medication, but prolonged therapy to address the deep traumas that have obviously contributed to her pathological behavior. Laura, you will need to decide if you want to file a formal complaint for psychological abuse, falsification of medical documents, and possibly fraud, considering any money she may have obtained under false medical pretenses. The mention of possible legal consequences suddenly triggered a disturbing memory. Over the 3 years, I had spent an astronomical amount of money on supposed treatments, expensive medications that Helena claimed to need but probably never took, specialized medical equipment that I now realize was never really used, in addition to having completely depleted my life savings and taken on significant loans to cover medical expenses. The financial dimension of the fraud added another layer of violation to the already devastating emotional betrayal. She robbed me financially too, I murmured with growing realization of the full scope of the fraud. All those imported medications from Switzerland that cost thousands of Ries per month, the supposed consultations with renowned specialists who only accepted cash payments, the specialized medical equipment she insisted was essential. God, I must have spent more than 300,000 Ries in 3 years. I sold investments, emptied my savings, even pawned family jewelry, all for phantom treatments of an imaginary disease. Ricardo squeezed my hand tightly as the full magnitude of the betrayal, emotional, psychological, and now financial, became clear. Teresa added in a grave voice, "It's not just your money, Laura. Helena also extorted considerable sums from me under threat of revealing certain private aspects of my life, and I suspect other family members and friends were also victims of her financial manipulations. When we gather all the evidence, this could constitute a serious criminal case of aggravated fraud, in addition to the psychological abuse. She built an empire of lies that financed her luxurious lifestyle while maintaining the facade of a suffering victim. Helena, realizing that the legal and financial consequences were accumulating exponentially, attempted one last desperate maneuver, falling to her knees in a position of melodramatic supplication. Laura, my beloved daughter, I beg for your forgiveness. Yes, I lied about the cancer, but it was only because I was desperately terrified of losing you. I promise I'll undergo any treatment you demand. Take any medication they prescribe, attend as many therapy sessions as necessary. But please don't send me to an asylum like a raving lunatic. Don't prosecute me criminally like a common criminal. I'm your mother, the woman who carried you for 9 months, who felt the pains of childbirth to bring you into this world. Does that count for nothing? Does the blood of my blood mean absolutely nothing to you? Her theatrical pleas, even in the face of total exposure and imminent consequences, still carried obvious manipulative elements, invoking biological motherhood as a shield against accountability, trying to make me feel guilty for seeking justice, painted herself as a victim even while partially admitting the fraud. It was like watching a master manipulator refuse to abandon her tools, even when they had been rendered completely ineffective. Blood isn't a license for abuse, Mother, I replied with firmness that surprised me. Years of therapy that I would start tomorrow already manifesting in emotional clarity. Motherhood isn't a free pass for psychological destruction. You had 1,000 chances to stop. 1,000 moments where you could have chosen real love over sick control. Every time you saw me crying from exhaustion. Every time Ricardo begged you to have mercy. Every time I fainted from stress taking care of you. These were moments when a mother with an ounce of genuine love would have stopped the farce. But you chose to continue, escalate, intensify. Now you will face the natural and inevitable consequences of your monstrous choices. Dr. Paulo looked out the window and announced, "The ambulance has arrived. Helena, I strongly recommend that you cooperate voluntarily. It will be better for everyone, especially for you. Dr. Marina is excellent at what she does, and with proper treatment and genuine commitment, there is a possibility of some form of recovery, and perhaps, in the distant future, some kind of limited and supervised reconciliation with your family, if they choose it. But the first step is recognizing that you need serious and prolonged professional help." 2 paramedics entered the room discreetly, clearly experienced in delicate mental health situations, maintaining a non-threatening distance while assessing the situation. Helena looked around one last time, her gaze stopping on each face. Marcia crying silently in Fernando's arms, Teresa with an expression of guilty relief, Dr. Paulo maintaining professional composure, Ricardo protectively shielding me, and finally on me, standing in the center of what should have been the happiest celebration of my life, wearing a gold engagement dress stained with tears amidst the ruins of destroyed decorations and shattered dreams. "You'll regret this," she said in a suddenly calm and cold voice that sent chills down my spine. All the previous hysteria evaporated, replaced by something darker and more ominous. "When I die alone and abandoned in that horrible place, when you discover too late that I was really sick all along, and you ignored the signs out of paranoia, you will carry this guilt for the rest of your miserable lives. Laura, you will never be truly happy, because deep in your heart you will always wonder if you did the right thing. Ricardo will eventually realize he married a broken woman incapable of trust, damaged beyond repair. Marcia, your children will grow up knowing their grandmother was locked away by her own family. And all of you, will discover that karma exists and collects its debts with compound interest." Her final words were calculated to plant seeds of doubt and future guilt, a last attempt to maintain some psychological control even as she was physically removed. But something fundamental had changed in me. The fog of manipulation had finally dissipated, leaving only crystalline clarity about the toxic and irredeemable nature of the relationship. As the paramedics gently but firmly escorted her out, she maintained eye contact with me until the last possible second, her eyes promising that this wasn't over, that she would find a way to regain control, that the game had merely changed arenas, not ended. The silence that followed her exit was profound and dense, like the vacuum after an explosion. The hall, previously filled with chaotic and emotional energy, suddenly seemed vast and empty. The few remaining guests began making discreet movements toward the exit, murmuring inadequate condolences and empty promises of, "If you need anything," leaving only the intimate family circle. Ricardo finally broke the silence, his voice gentle but determined. "Laura, my love, let's get out of here. Let's go home, or to a hotel, anywhere that isn't this memorial of trauma. You need to rest, process all of this in peace, away from these physical reminders of what happened today." But I couldn't move yet, paralyzed by the magnitude of the transformation that had occurred. In just a few hours, I had lost the mother I never really had, discovered that my father had been a previous victim of the same abuse, realized that 3 years of my life had been an elaborate lie, and faced the possibility of legal and psychological consequences that would extend for years. The engagement that should have marked the beginning of a new happy chapter had become the stage for the explosive end of a toxic relationship that had defined and constrained me throughout my adult life. Marcia approached hesitantly, her face still stained with tears. "Laura, I know nothing I say can undo the years of suffering, but I want you to know that I'm here for you now. Really this time. I'll stay in São Paulo for as long as you need. I'll accompany you to appointments with lawyers, therapists, whatever is necessary. I won't run away to the safety of distance anymore. We're the only ones who truly understand what it's like to have Helena as a mother, and we need to support each other to heal from these deep wounds." Dr. Paulo, always the voice of reason and medical experience, added, "Laura, I've registered your name at the hospital's psychology clinic. Dr. Sandra Mendez specializes in recovery from prolonged psychological abuse, particularly in cases involving parental manipulation. She has an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you want to immediately begin the healing process. I also strongly recommend that you consult a lawyer about the financial implications and the possibility of recovering at least part of the fraudulently obtained resources. And more importantly, you need a complete medical checkup. 3 years of severe chronic stress cause real physical damage that needs to be addressed." Teresa, clearly struggling with her own guilt, offered, "I have all the documents I mentioned about Helena's history of manipulations, including correspondence from your father and old medical records that prove the decades-long pattern. I also have evidence of the financial extortions I suffered. All of this could be useful both for the legal case and for your therapeutic process. Understanding that this didn't start with you, that it's an old and established pattern, might help alleviate the irrational guilt I know you must be feeling. You didn't cause this, couldn't have prevented it, and definitely didn't deserve a single second of this monstrous treatment." Fernando, always pragmatic, began coordinating the practical aspects. "I'll contact the club manager about the situation, explain that there was a family medical emergency, and arrange for everything to be cleaned up and the decorations donated to charity. I'll also speak with the vendors about possible cancellations and refunds. You don't need to worry about these mundane details now. Ricardo, take Laura home. She needs peace and quiet to process all this. Marcia and I will take care of all the loose ends here." As I prepared to finally leave the hall that had become an emotional crime scene, I looked around the space one last time. The elegantly decorated tables with Belgian linen tablecloths and exotic flower centerpieces, the gold Chiavari chairs tied with organza bows, the marble floor that still showed the marks where Helena had performed her last great manipulation. Everything seemed surreal, like sets from a film that had abruptly ended mid-production. The 5-tiered cake, a work of art in fondant and sugar that had taken days to create, remained untouched, its delicate buttercream roses beginning to wilt under the warm lights, a perfect metaphor for all the moments of sweetness that Helena had soured with her manipulations. Ricardo gently guided me to the exit, his strong arm around my waist keeping me steady while my legs trembled with physical and emotional exhaustion. As we passed through the glass doors into the fresh night air, I breathed deeply for the first time in what felt like hours, perhaps years. The night air was surprisingly fresh for September, carrying the scent of jasmine from the club's gardens mixed with the promise of distant rain. The stars were visible despite the city lights, small points of light in the darkness that somehow seemed more hopeful than they had in a long time. "It's strange," I murmured to Ricardo as we walked to the car. "I should be devastated because my engagement was ruined, because I discovered my mother is a manipulative monster, because I lost 3 years of my life to an elaborate lie. But all I feel is relief. Such deep and overwhelming relief that I can barely process it. As if I had been carrying a 100-kilogram rock for 3 years, and someone finally took it off my shoulders. Does that make me a horrible person? Feeling relief instead of sadness?" Ricardo stopped walking and gently turned me to face him, his hands holding my face with infinite tenderness. "Laura, my love, you are not horrible for feeling relief. You have been freed from a psychological prison that was slowly killing you. Relief is the most natural and healthy response possible. Sadness will come later, in waves, when you process the loss not of Helena as she is, but of the mother you deserve to have and never did. But now, in this moment, you have every right to feel the lightness of finally being free from the chains that bound you. And I will be here for every step of that healing journey, whether it's relief, anger, sadness, or any other emotion that arises." His words broke something inside me, and I began to cry again, But this time they were different tears. Not of pain or anger, but of profound gratitude for having someone who loved me enough to stand by my side through the hell that had been our relationship until now, who had seen Helena's manipulations but respected my boundaries, who was here now offering unconditional love when I needed it most. "Do you still want to marry me?" I asked in a small, vulnerable voice. Even knowing that I come with all this toxic baggage, that I'll need years of therapy, that Helena will always be a dark shadow over our relationship even if we maintain no contact? "Laura," he replied with conviction that left no room for doubt, "I want to marry you even more now than I did this morning. Because now I know that you are even stronger than I imagined, that you have the courage to confront devastating truths and choose healing over continued enabling, that you value our relationship enough to fight for it against forces that tried to destroy it. Helena is not a shadow on our future. She is a closed chapter of your past. Our future will be written by us without manipulations, without lies, without fabricated crises, just real, honest, and healthy love." As he drove through the silent city, the lights passing in golden posts, I mentally began making a list of everything I would need to do in the coming days, weeks, months. Intensive therapy to deprogram 3 years of gaslighting and decades of conditioning. Legal consultations about fraud and financial recovery. Medical check-ups to address the physical damage of chronic stress. Difficult conversations with friends and family about what had really happened. Decisions about whether to maintain any future contact with Helena after psychiatric treatment. The reconstruction of my identity without the role of devoted daughter of the mother with cancer. It was overwhelming, but also strangely empowering. For the first time in 3 years, perhaps for the first time in my life, I was in complete control of my own narrative. Ricardo's apartment was exactly as it always was, an oasis of calm and normality that Helena had never managed to completely contaminate with her chaos, though not for lack of trying. The green and vibrant plants in the windows, the books organized but not obsessively on the shelves, the picture frames with photos of us in genuinely happy moments stolen between crises. Everything seemed surreal in its normality after the gothic drama I had just experienced. Ricardo went straight to the kitchen and began preparing chamomile tea, the simple domestic ritual somehow deeply comforting after the elaborate chaos of the party hall. "You know what's saddest?" I said as I sank into the soft sofa, finally feeling the total exhaustion. Part of me still worries if she's okay in the psychiatric hospital, if she's comfortable, if she's afraid, even knowing that everything was a lie, that she manipulated me cruelly, that she destroyed 3 years of my life and contributed to my father's premature death. I still feel this programmed compulsion to care for her, to ensure her well-being. It's as if she installed malicious software in my brain that continues running even after I discovered the virus. "Is this normal?" "It's completely normal," Ricardo answered, bringing 2 mugs of steaming tea and sitting beside me. "It's called trauma bonding. You were conditioned for decades to prioritize her needs over yours, to derive your self-worth from how well you took care of her. This kind of programming doesn't disappear instantly just because the truth was revealed. That's why therapy will be so important, to help you slowly rewrite that code, replace destructive patterns with healthy ones, learn the differentiation between genuine love and manipulated obligation. It will take time, it will be difficult, there will be setbacks, but you will succeed. I am absolutely certain of that." "Ricardo," I began, my voice gaining strength with each word, "I want to make our wedding different. Small, intimate, just people who genuinely love and support us. Maybe on a beach or in a garden. Something simple and authentic. And I want to do it soon. Not wait months to plan something elaborate. I've wasted 3 years of my life. I don't want to waste even one more day. Can we get married as soon as we resolve the basic legal issues? Would you be up for something like that?" He smiled. That smile that had sustained me through fabricated crises. "I would marry you tomorrow at the courthouse if you wanted. The important thing was never the party or the celebration. It was always our commitment to each other. Helena tried to destroy that with her manipulations. But she failed. We survived. Our love survived. And now we can finally build the life we always dreamed of without her shadow hanging over every decision. We can travel without false emergencies calling us back. We can have children without fear that she'll traumatize them like she traumatized you. We can simply live. Normal. Lead a life without constant drama. The possibility of a normal life, without perpetual crises, without elaborate manipulations, without the constant anxiety of waiting for the next fabricated emergency. seemed almost too fantastic to believe. For 3 years, I had lived in a state of constant hypervigilance, always expecting the phone to ring with the next crisis, always prepared to drop everything and run to Helena's side. The idea of being able to make plans and actually keep them, of being able to relax without guilt, of being able to prioritize my own happiness without being accused of filial neglect, was simultaneously exciting and terrifying. I'm afraid, I quietly admitted, afraid that without the constant drama, without crises to solve, I won't know how to simply exist. For 3 years, my entire identity was daughter taking care of mother with cancer. Before that, it was daughter trying to gain approval from impossible to please mother. I don't know who I am without that role. What if I discover I'm not an interesting person? What if without the drama, we're just ordinary? Ricardo put his tea mug on the table and pulled me into his arms. Ordinary sounds absolutely perfect. I want to be boringly, gloriously ordinary with you. I want discussions about who forgot to buy milk, not about whether your mother is faking another crisis. I want stress about what color to paint the living room, not about whether we'll make it to our anniversary without a fabricated hospitalization. Ordinary is the luxury Helena never allowed you to have, and it's exactly what we deserve. And as for who you are without that role, you are Laura. Talented architect who had to turn down incredible projects, funny woman who hasn't had a chance to laugh in 3 years, loving partner who always had to put me second. You are so many things beyond Helena's daughter. You just haven't had the chance to discover all of them yet. Did you like Laura's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's one more story waiting for you here on screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.